On this episode of the show, I have with me Russ Desa. He is founder and CEO at LiveKit. We're going to be talking about the growth and emergence of voice AI. We're going to talk to him about the space. It is a bit early and it is still a growing space. We'll ask him what he is seeing. Some of the interactions that people have with computers are changing, and where does AI fit with that, specifically voice AI? We're going to talk to him a little bit about what the infrastructure looks like, how it looks a little bit different in terms of a technological framework. And we're going to also talk about AI and robotics, and do we need that keyboard and screen, and a couple other things if we can fit it in. Russ, thanks for taking the time.
Hey, Amir. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Before we start, can you tell everyone what you guys do at LiveKit?
Yeah. At LiveKit, we give your application the ability to do something it's never been able to do before. And that is, it can see, it can hear, it can speak. And in the case of physical AI or robotics, it can also move. So we are this horizontal end-to-end platform for voice, video, and physical AI.
Well, that has got to be a cool space, and I'm excited about the conversation. And let's dive into it. I guess, you know, when we mention voice AI, I know a lot of people are familiar with some forms of AI, and maybe they'll think we're talking about, you know, their favorite electronic device where you can ask it questions and prompt it, right? Some familiarity. But you mentioned, as a category, we're still early, and I wanted to maybe start there because I think some people hear that and go, "Well, I've had those electronic devices, and I've been speaking to them for the last 10 years, and maybe you could help us understand that."
Yeah, it's very true. I think that there's been this big unlock in the last 10 years, right? So Siri, Alexa, these are not new applications, right? You've had them on your dresser, in your bedroom, or on your kitchen counter. And I think the difference between that kind of generation or iteration of voice AI embedded in these devices and what we're seeing now, it really kind of all falls to this new technology of LLMs that we have. So the way that those old systems were implemented is they were really just a giant decision tree. If the user said this, then go this path. Otherwise, if they said this, go this path. Otherwise, if they said this third thing, go this path. And there were a fixed number of these kinds of branches and levels in that decision tree that were coded by humans. So they had, sports and entertainment and news and technology and all of these different and the weather, of course. And so what we have now, though, with LLMs is we have a model, a neural network that has a general understanding of, not just the internet, but a general understanding of human language and concepts. And so you can kind of ask it any question and get any kind of response without the human having to have coded all of these rules or this decision tree explicitly. And I think because of that technology on the back end, that really opens up the kind of application space to many different kinds of use cases. And the UX, if you compare it to something from 10 years ago with an Alexa, it's like night and day of a difference because of this kind of underlying technology that we now have.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. I guess as you're kind of looking at this space, and we're just starting to see other areas emerge right now. We're seeing the growth of a lot of consumer-facing LLMs. We're seeing it being incorporated in engineering teams. Obviously, you just mentioned voice and some of what the opportunity looks like. I guess to kind of maybe give us a couple of concrete examples of where the use case would be if you were looking at leveraging voice AI. It's obviously not Siri or Alexa because your voice AI can learn and grow and understand. So maybe a few use cases would be good.
I think that there's two broad buckets. So I think backing up, right, there's kind of voice AI, there's video AI. Computer vision is going to be a really kind of popular thing that gets incorporated into applications down the road. Then there's physical AI, which is where we take kind of voice and vision AI or video AI and embody them within like a robot that can move and navigate the physical world. And you can kind of think of these three things as almost like a spectrum of adoption, right? Like video AI is just starting, people are just beginning to like do kind of real-time computer vision through LLMs. Gemini just launched like an image segmentation or video segmentation model yesterday, and we have these avatars now coming out, and then robotics is a bit farther down, but we're making a lot of progress there. And so I'd say like near term or short term, let's say in the next 18 months, voice AI is really like the category that you're seeing kind of this explosive growth. And in voice AI, there are two specific use case buckets in my mind that we see at least. The first one is kind of open-ended voice AI. It's the ChatGPT voice mode that you're using on your phone, kind of that assistive experience. It's therapy-based applications that are built where you can have a conversation with an AI therapist. There's companies that are exploring building AI within education. How do you learn about a new topic? How do you have like a tutor? There's language learning. So if you want to practice speaking a language that you desire to learn with a native speaker, or a native AI speaker of that language, you can kind of have that conversation. So apps like Speak and Duolingo provide an experience like that. But these are kind of open-ended voice AI applications where there isn't really a specific goal in mind. You're kind of having like just a free-form conversation like you would with a friend. On the other end of the spectrum, there are these goal-oriented voice AI applications. So that's things where you have a deterministic workflow. You want the user to move between different steps in that workflow. But within each step, you want the flexibility of having a system that can understand natural language and generate a natural language response. So in that bucket, we have things like customer support. We have kind of healthcare workflows, so insurance eligibility checking, patient intake in a hospital, clinical note-taking at a doctor's office. You have people building applications in finance, so doing things like wire confirmations automatically, via an AI, or loan qualification via phone call. And then there's education as well, where it's not a free-form tutor, but there's like an actual lesson that you're moving through, and there are different steps in that lesson towards completion. And so for those kinds of use cases, one interesting thing I think to note is that the vast majority of them are actually telephony in origin. Like they originate from a telephone call. When we were working with OpenAI on ChatGPT voice mode, one of the things that we talked about internally was, where is the first place that voice is going to be super disruptive? And we thought to ourselves, okay, it has to be in telephony, because that is a system that's at scale, right? There's over 1 trillion phone calls made every single day around the world. And, of those phone calls are, generally speaking, like they don't have any UI, and they're a voice native system, right? You're speaking voice into that system and receiving voice, from the other end. And so it makes sense that for all these business processes that originate from a telephone call, you can put an AI on one end of the line and automate a lot of that. So that's like a popular kind of high penetration category for voice AI.
Absolutely. That's. I mean, I could see a lot of extensions of that. That seems like just the starting point. And I guess from the standpoint of humans, obviously, a picture's worth 1,000 words for sure. But humans are verbal. We still love the words. We love conversation. We love speaking. To an extent, I feel like we've all gotten used to looking at a screen and interacting with our fingers in lieu of words. But sometimes, even with ChatGPT, it's a lot easier just to voice dictate your thoughts rather than type it out. It'll read back. When you think about just how natural verbal communication is for humans, I'm going to ask your opinion. I have no opinion. I do, but I want your opinion. Where do you think maybe the crossover is? Where's the cutoff of people preferring verbal versus looking at a screen and using their fingers or navigating it? Because obviously we've also now gotten very comfortable with our mobile devices for 15 years to interact that way. Is there a thing you're seeing that people are going to start trending towards more verbal communication with a device?
I think so. I think that there's two sort of, call it, headwinds that prevent it from being everywhere. One is behavioral, one is technological. So I think on the behavioral side, as you said, we're very used to taking out our phones and tapping on things and scrolling around. Even on our desktop computers, we're used to this. And this is something that I think you can see. You can see the trend line changing a little bit when you go and you look at folks that are very young. Children are very accustomed to using Siri, Alexa, talking to the computer. It's very natural for them. We learn to speak before we learn to read, right? And the other thing that you see is in countries like India, it's like almost like a voice first country. They always leave voice memos for each other with messaging. They don't type their messages out. And so I think in other places around the world, you can kind of see these early trends. I really do think that it's going to require, a generational shift, or I think you'll see voice penetrate across the vast majority of applications and become like a mainstream interface. Perhaps even more common than like, touching and interacting with the application, with generations, under us. I think we're very used to what we're used to, like our parents were used to what they were used to. And I think on the technological side, there's also a barrier. And that barrier in my mind is something called turn detection. So when we're speaking right now, we are using both visual cues and audio cues. So we do this on the phone as well, sans visual cues. We're using this information to understand when each other is done speaking our thoughts and when it's the right time for you to start speaking. If you've interacted with kind of these early voice assistants, they don't really know yet when they can interrupt you, or if you're done speaking. And if you pause for a second, sometimes they'll just start speaking and saying something. And it's this frustrating experience. We're like, wait, I wasn't done. And so humans do this a lot better than the AI models do. And so this to me is the hardest problem in voice AI. Once you have a system, and we will get there, and I think we're going to get there pretty fast within the next 1 to 2 years. When you have a system that can perfectly understand when you are speaking to it, when it should speak back to you, and even in group scenarios, when you are talking to other people in the room, maybe other agents or other AIs in the room, and when you're talking to this specific AI, when it completely understands that perfectly at the human level, and ignore privacy for a moment, right? Why would you not just have this AI always on 24/7, listening to conversations, almost on your shoulder, on a table next to you, and adding value when it makes sense for it to, right? Remember, the setting for this is that it perfectly understands when it should speak, when it shouldn't, when it should jump in with like helpful information. If you have a computer like that, why would you ever use anything else? It's like, and imagine cost isn't a concern, right? Like just think about the product, the ideal product. This thing is a friend of yours that's super smart, knows everything about you, understands all your preferences, understands your interests, and you can just leave it on 24/7, carry it around with you, and it can add value to your day, augment your reality. You don't even need to take out a computer anymore, right? You can just talk to it and it can go and do work for you. And, that kind of ties into this whole idea of agentic systems. And so I think we're going to get there. And once we have that, it will obviate basically all the stuff that we were doing before, with browsers and tabs and scrolling around and learning different UIs from different companies. It's just all going to go away.
Yeah, I think that's going to be fascinating, because I do think, as you've been speaking about this and really talking about the divergence of voice and what our eyes see, our touch and feel of the keyboard, the screen, all those things, it seems like there will be a break from a decoupling of those devices. And some of it, obviously, as you mentioned, we've gotten used to search being something where we do have to go through, right? Navigation is something we do have to, but to your point, if you could have something on 24/7 and is responsive to your voice, and maybe we'll leave privacy aside, and we include robotics into that conversation because a lot of robotics will be voice driven, there will be a time potentially where we will see device evolution to support voice, and potentially we'll see the keyboard and screen left behind or left for certain use cases. Because I can speak a lot faster than I can type, and if something can do X with what I'm saying, that just makes me more efficient as well.
100%. I think the screen will still be there, right? There's still uses for the screen, just like there's still uses for paper, right? And writing stuff down and reading stuff. I mean, it's easier to read a menu of things to order from than it is for an AI or a human to verbally communicate every single item on that menu and every single ingredient. That's actually slower. And so the screen or some kind of UI, let's put it, whether it's a screen or it's something in front of your field of view, rendered on the back of your retina or something, it's visual information still has its place and its uses. But I think what you see as the AI becomes more human-like is that the inputs and outputs become more human-like too, to these systems.
Absolutely. That makes sense. I want to dive into some of the technology side of this, but I am kind of curious about adoption, right? So when I do post about AI, early on, the conversation was very curious. In the last year, I've noticed the messages I get, the direct messages I get, the tone has changed. There's a little bit of fear in the messages I get back. It's okay. I understand it. I don't take it personally. But I'm also starting to think, we as humans, we take time to assimilate, to adopt, and everyone has their, pace of adoption they're willing to do. When you look at fear, does the barrier to adoption for voice only, and again, you mentioned we already communicate with telephony, we speak to each other. There's a very comfort level. There's some technology limitations you caveat as well. Do you think that general society, when they see voice as AI, will there be a similar fear? And again, some of it's losing their jobs, because media is talking about people losing their jobs constantly. Of course, we're going to start fearing AI. But do you see similar with voice AI, or is the medium enough where people might feel just more naturally inclined to it?
I think there's elements of both. I think that, when I mentioned how we have some technological barriers to this being everywhere and mainstream and the default interface to systems, in some ways it's a feature, not a bug, because we do need an adjustment period, right? If tomorrow all of a sudden the AI was responding in 200 milliseconds at the speed of a human and doing perfect turn detection and knew everything and could respond intelligently to everything and didn't hallucinate, it'd be pretty terrifying. People would start to ask, is this AGI? Do we have it yet? It's you sometimes need to see the cracks to get a bit more comfortable that we're not being replaced anytime soon. I also think that I think one other part of this adjustment period is, it's one thing for the AI to be able to order food for you, manipulate different systems in a digital world. Once you start to embody this, and you can have an AI that can do all kinds of things in the physical world, it can drive cars, and it can play ping pong, and it can cook. Then I think that's the next phase of adjustment that's going to be necessary, and it probably helps that these robots don't quite walk like humans yet, and they still look a little robotic. But it is I think it's a valid concern. Sometimes even for me, I'm sitting in this stuff and using these applications and helping people build these kinds of things, that have a forward looking or futuristic kind of lean towards them. And even for me, sometimes I'm just this is there's a little bit of eeriness here. It is kind of uncomfortable, for sure.
Absolutely. From a technology perspective, obviously, I think a lot of conversation, a lot of people who are interested in diving into some of how technology is built. I mean, we've heard a lot about the stuff that's already more mainstream, right? I think voice, as you mentioned, growing category, still early, working out some of the foundational issues. From a technology perspective, how different is it from other forms of AI? You alluded to, obviously there's going to be computer vision. Obviously we're seeing LLMs in different industries and different fashions being used. Is there a big difference in the underlying? Is it similar? Where are the differences?
It's a huge difference, actually. I think it's a paradigm shift in compute. It's not just a paradigm shift in computing. It's a paradigm shift in kind of the underlying architecture, how you build these kinds of applications, the types of infrastructure you need to support these kinds of applications. So the way I sort of explain it to people is, the internet, as we understand it, was not built for what we're talking about here. It wasn't built for voice AI. It wasn't built for video AI. HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol, right? It was a protocol designed for transferring text over a network. So at the networking level, right? Like if I'm talking into a microphone, or if I'm streaming my webcam to someone else or to an AI model, I need to be able to send, those photons of light and vibrations in the air. In the case of a microphone, I need to be able to send that information over a network really, really fast to somewhere else, to an AI model that can then process it and generate a response and stream that response back to me, that audio and video response. And so our networks weren't really built or designed for this purpose. They were designed for transferring text. And so you need to use a different protocol called WebRTC. And then that protocol is really hard to use, much harder than HTTP to use. And so LiveKit builds infrastructure that makes WebRTC as easy as HTTP to leverage as an application developer. But then on top of that, right, like you have this AI that's running in a data center, and historically that would be your application server. It's like your web app server. And that web app server is stateless. And so it's like, handling multiple requests that are coming in, and looking up information in a database, generating a response, and then like disconnecting from whoever needed that information, then connecting to the next person. And you just can't do that for voice and video AI, because voice and video AI conversations are long-lived. They're contextual. So in a web application, every request you get from a client device, from a user, has no knowledge or memory of the previous request. But imagine if you and I were having a conversation right now, if we were running this interview and you had no context of what I had just said before, right? Or the question that you asked me before, and I had no understanding of that either. That just isn't going to work for voice AI. So you need something that is stateful versus stateless. And so you need to kind of model almost like how a human call center is modeled, where you have a pool of agents that are sitting there waiting for calls to come in. When a call comes in from a customer, you take one out of the pool, you pair them with that customer, and then they're having that conversation one-on-one, persistently connected for the entire life or duration of that conversation. And then once they're done, the support issue is solved, you put that agent back into the pool so they can wait for new calls to come in. And you kind of have to model your agent-based backend in that way. That's how you have to deploy and scale these things, is where there's a pool of them waiting, and each agent instance can only work with or interact with one user at one time until that interaction is complete, that session is done, the conversation is over, and then it can go back, that agent can go back and service someone else. And so it is a paradigm shift from the way that web applications are developed and deployed.
That's certainly different, as you described it, as the traditional ways that people have developed for the internet alone, let alone talking about AI. I think that's a great overview. I guess when you're looking at, and you mentioned some of the limitations that we currently have, obviously understanding each other in turn, speaking in turn, maintaining that state. As you see voice AI, and obviously with, let's say, a ChatGPT or similar tools, a Claude, it remembers conversation to conversation. We start realizing, oh, you know what? A year ago, it had no clue what one thread to the next thread was. Now it does. With voice AI, I would assume similarly, a lot of that power you just said, having that state, would be also recognizing my voice, carrying that conversation, remembering something we chatted about 4 years ago, pulling that in. I mean, all these little nuances that human communication have, and also having the ability to position itself where if it doesn't know something, to be able to interact. I mean, some of those human nuances, I think, as you've been talking, I've been realizing there's a lot of subtlety that we just take for granted because we're born with it.
There's so much like conversational dynamics that need to be kind of modeled, and synthesized for these kinds of new types of applications. All the things you said are absolutely true, right? I mean, like long-term memory is one thing, being able to go back into the archives and figure out, what was said here at this point in the past, and injecting that into the current conversation in some form. The other thing that you mentioned, that you touched on, that I don't think we're doing quite yet, but we're starting to see some of it, is like authentication and identity. Like, how do you understand who you're talking to? And, just from a voice signature, do you incorporate visual kind of elements into that as well? Like I know I'm talking to you because I know what you look like. And then I also know what you sound like. And that's how I do kind of like this implicit authentication. And so we're starting to do that with speaker diarization and some of these audio models, which can separate out different speakers, but it can't quite do identification of speakers yet. So we'll get there. But so that's another piece that we have to build out. Then you can extend it even into the physical domain. And so then what if you have like 3 robots sitting at a table with you, and then there's like 2 other humans, and the humans that are closer to the microphone for one of the robots are having a conversation with each other, but then someone across the room is also there and saying and speaking and addressing that robot directly, and they're farther away from the microphone, so they're kind of maybe considered background audio. How does the robot understand, wait, like this person over here on the other end of the table or room is talking to me, but not these people that are close to my microphone, that are talking to each other. And so like getting even group dynamics to work correctly once you move into the physical world, where group dynamics is almost like the default, it's going to be a significant challenge. And like we have to invent a bunch of technology that is going to be able to handle those kinds of scenarios.
That's super cool. Well, I could keep asking you questions. I feel like this is one of those episodes where, I hope other people are listening to it going, wow, there's a lot of road to cover. And, as we start going down this path, there will be a lot of use cases that could help. And I'm sure somebody might have, I know we didn't dive into the technical side as much, and maybe a follow-up episode down the road, but if somebody does, I appreciate that. If somebody does want to maybe ask you something more technical or follow up about something we didn't, have a conversation about, is there a good way of connecting and asking something?
Absolutely. Yeah. I love helping people build stuff in this space and understand even just more about the stack, the infrastructure underneath. So you can find me, on Twitter. My DMs are open. I'm at D for David, S for Sugar, A for Apple, at Dasa. Helps to have worked at Twitter to have a short handle, nice and easy. And then you can also, find me in the LiveKit community, livekit.io/join-Slack. That's our community link. And yeah, I should be fairly easy to find. And the team as well, right? We're on GitHub, GitHub/LiveKit. And we're all happy to have a conversation and help folks build.
Awesome, man. Russ, I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amir. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. That's it for the episode. Be back again. Different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. One, we hadn't covered voice AI, so this is exciting for me. We talked to Russ about where we're at, where the evolution's going, the use cases, a little bit on the technology stack and how it's different, some of the challenges, and where the development's going. It's actually super exciting. I think where it can take us and what it can do will be just transformational. And that's just outside of what you've already seen with other AI products. So please share this episode with somebody else that might also benefit from it. Also, like, subscribe, comment, let me know how the show's going for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.